Hi, everyone. Has God been pruning you? Well, I get the privilege of telling you that spring is here. And we're going to read from John 15 and talk a little bit about pruning. So, if you are going through a time or you've come out of a time of loss, I want you again to know that spring is here. So, John 15, I'm reading from the ESV. I'm going to be reading from verse 1 to 11, but I am going to break it up a little bit, okay? I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away like a branch and withers, and the branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. So there are three different types of examples that are placed here. I'm going to be focusing singularly on the branch that is being pruned. So the two other examples, thrown away like a branch and withers, and the branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. Those are two other outcomes that I'm not going to be discussing. So for the sake of this video, we are discussing the branch that is being pruned, aka you. Okay, me. So dealing with us as believers who are being pruned by the Lord. Now, when you look actually at what pruning is, it does help understand a bit of the process as to what is going on when dealing with pruning. So there are different types of pruning depending on what is being pruned. So for example, a tree that is being pruned is different than a grapevine, for example. So I'm going to focus in on a grapevine for the purpose of comparison, primarily because that appears to be kind of the place where the Lord references within scripture. So I'm going to stick in that area for the sake of simplicity and also appearingly what he is referencing within this. So the Lord being the source and us again being branches, right? So vine and then branches. So some interesting things about pruning. So all vines go through pruning. And there are two different types of primary forms of pruning. And depending on what you are doing, it relates to where the fruit is grown on the particular branch, right? So they talk about cane pruning and spur pruning. So depending on what kind of circumstance you're dealing with the vine is what is going to dictate what kind of pruning you are going to be engaging in. There are two specific types of functions that are for the reason of pruning. So one, to give shape and structure, and number two, to control the amount of fruit that a vine produces, and particularly like where is the fruit being produced. Additional interesting information is that there is a season in which it is common to prune. It is when the vine is dormant. So when it is cold, it is winter. I've seen different references. There could be references to end of November, beginning of December, depending on like how cold I imagine it is. Sometimes it could be later, it could be in January as well. But ultimately, it is when it is not active, right? And so, in fact, if you prune at the wrong time, this can cause bleeding because there is sap that comes through the spring, and this could actually start to kind of leak and like reduce energy and vitality from the vine itself. So timing is really important. And the precision of where the cut is done also, again, depends on the outcome that one receives from the vine. So For example, you want the cuts to be closest to the source, and you want the branches that are retained to be that which produces, a significant amount of fruit, but also can be distributed depending on what the vine is producing, right? So if it's close to the source, they're cutting it close, like the branch is being cut close to the actual vine. If it is something that is better distributed, then there is more space for it. And it depends on the type of cut that is happening. I know this sounds like a lot of logistical information, but I want you to understand how precise and how thoughtful the Lord is when he's using a comparison, so that it is not just like arbitrary things that are being removed. There is a purpose to things being removed for the time that it is being removed, the way in which it would cause the least amount of harm to the vine itself and to the branches themselves. And even looking at the length and duration of the actual cane. So when they are doing cane pruning, they are doing it with the 1 year growth, right? And so there's also training that takes place for the vine as well. And ultimately, a plant should actually be pruned annually. And this is the way to get the best distribution of fruit to the resources, like, for example, sunlight, resources in terms of even in contact with other plants as well, right? So having plants that are extremely long can also impact the ones that are beside it, which I thought was kind of an interesting point of comparison as well, too. So ultimately, there are different reasons why the Lord prunes, why this comparison is quite relevant, and why in spring, this is where you get to see the fruit, the buds start to come, where you're able to see what has happened after the pruning. Okay, so when thinking about us as being believers who are being pruned, there is a purpose, and it is to optimize how fruitful we will be in a way that distributes through the resources available and at the optimal time, and will continue to be maintained throughout our life. Okay, so when the Lord is pruning, he is removing things. And this sometimes can be a challenging place to be because it can happen really quick. And it can happen very suddenly. And it can happen like there are a lot of things at the same time. However, the intention is to produce more fruit in the life of the person in which is being pruned. Okay, let's go back to verse 7. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. So, abiding in the Lord is part of this, and it is specifically outlined for us that abide in my love, and if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love. So to abide in the Lord is in keeping his commandments. So yes, time is important with him, but it's also in terms of how I do, fulfill, relate to him as well. And from that is how I'm abiding in his love. And from that, I will experience a fullness of joy as a product of this abiding in him. So ultimately, as believers, we will be pruned. We will be pruned regularly. We are pruned at the time in which it produces the least amount of harm in a way that will optimize our fruitfulness as believers. And I get to come bearing the wonderful message that spring is here. Now, depending on where you're located, you might be looking outside and thinking, are you sure about this? Yes, I am sure. Spring is here. Now, the thing with seasons is that seasons do not just abruptly stop, they cross over. So you're not going to find that when spring starts to introduce itself, that suddenly winter is completely over. There's usually kind of an overlap that takes place. And so what you notice is that there are less days that appear to be winter and more days that appear to be spring until winter has run its course and spring emerges. And similarly, when we see it moving into, summer, for example, those cool days can still overlap until summer has made its full emergence. So I want you to bear in mind that yes, spring is here. It doesn't mean everything abruptly stops. It means the season has changed and you are going to see the fruit that is born from the pruning process.